picture your Instagram feed for a second.
Oh, boy.
Right. Just, imagine you're scrolling, minding your own business, and you come across a post from, like, a fitness instructor or maybe an educational account you follow.
Yeah, we've all been there.
And sometimes that post feels like a cold, sterile textbook. I mean, it's perfectly lit. The posture is flawless. The caption is this heavily researched, bulleted list of biomechanical facts.
Very clinical.
Exactly. You look at it, maybe you save it for later, but you don't really, feel anything. But then you swipe a little further and you see a story from a different creator.
Right.
And they're just sitting on their living room floor, coffee in hand, hair kind of messy, and they're talking directly to the camera about like a struggle they had with a routine that morning.
The contrast is huge.
It is. Suddenly you aren't just learning. You feel like you're catching up with a close friend. And I want to ask, why does that happen? Why do some creators feel like distant professors while others feel like your daily confidant?
Well, it feels like magic, but it is actually entirely by design.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. The psychological mechanisms behind that feeling of intimacy are incredibly complex.
Yeah.
We think we are just, casually consuming content while we wait in line for a coffee, but we are actually stepping into a highly structured, deliberately engineered narrative ecosystem.
A deliberately engineered narrative ecosystem.
Wow.
Which is exactly what we are exploring in today's deep dive.
Yes, it is.
We are looking at this fascinating, really comprehensive guide written by Caroline Berger de Femini. She is the founder of Pilates Paris, and she wrote this document exploring how Pilates instructors can effectively build a meaningful Instagram presence.
It's a great read.
But I want to make our mission today very clear right out of the gate for you listening, because this goes way, way beyond just Pilates.
Oh, for sure.
What we have here is essentially a masterclass in the digital marketing psychology of storytelling. It's a blueprint for how any creator, in any field really, can turn a passive scrolling audience into a deeply engaged community.
Yeah, and when we connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes incredibly relevant for almost anyone.
Right.
Whether you are actively trying to build your own personal brand, working in digital marketing, or, if you simply want to understand why you feel so incredibly loyal and connected to certain influencers you've never actually met in real life.
Which is such a weird phenomenon when you think about it.
It really is. But this guide is revealing. We are going to unpack the invisible psychological architecture behind the content you consume every single day.
Yes.
We'll look at the massive shift from broadcasting facts to sharing vulnerability, how to actually structure a narrative in a format that vanishes in 24 hours.
Which is wild.
And the delicate and sometimes dangerous balance of engineering authenticity.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we really need to start by looking at how the very nature of teaching and, sharing information has shifted over the last few decades.
Right, the landscape has completely changed.
The guide outlines this massive transition from what it calls unidirectional media to horizontal interactive media.
Yeah.
For the longest time, if you wanted to learn Pilates, or really anything, you read a textbook, you watched a fixed, highly polished tutorial video, or you attended a formal masterclass.
Exactly. The expert stood up on a pedestal and the information flowed in one direction from them down to you.
Right, it's very top-down.
That older model is entirely focused on the transmission of technical gestures. It's the sage on the stage approach.
The sage on the stage, I like that.
But the advent of social networks, particularly the rise of Instagram stories, completely redefined the relationship between the professional and the practitioner.
It leveled the playing field.
Completely, making the communication horizontal. Caroline's guide references a study by Brown et al. From 2019, which is quite illuminating on this front.
What did they find?
Well, the research shows that in the digital fitness sector, storytelling acts directly on the affective dimension of the consumer.
Meaning their emotions.
Exactly. It targets their emotions. When an expert shares a narrative, when they show the backstage reality of preparing for a class, facing their own personal struggles, or just celebrating a tiny, seemingly insignificant victory, it mobilizes empathy in the viewer.
Okay, so it's the difference between watching a heavily edited, perfectly lit cooking show on TV versus FaceTiming your mom while she's actively burning the onions and trying to salvage the dinner.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. One is perfect, the other is human. And humans don't connect with perfection. We connect with the struggle. We connect with the burnt onions.
We absolutely connect with the burnt onions. And what's crucial to understand is why this matters so much in a discipline like Pilates.
Okay, why Pilates specifically?
Because it's a practice that inherently relies on body awareness, deep introspection, and a profound level of physical and emotional trust between the teacher and the student.
Right, you're putting your body in their hands, essentially.
Exactly. And in French, they make this beautiful distinction between savoir-faire, which is the technical know-how, or
Yeah.
the expertise, and savoir-être, which loosely translates to how to be. It's your character, your empathy, your authentic self.
Savoir-faire and savoir-être. I love that distinction. It separates the resume from the actual human being.
Yes. And in the modern digital landscape, seeing a creator's savoir-être is just as important as knowing they have the savoir-faire.
Makes sense.
By showing that human side, the expert steps off the pedestal. They no longer look distant or intimidating or, untouchable.
They become accessible.
Precisely. That shared vulnerability instills a climate of trust, which is the absolute prerequisite for getting someone to regularly engage with you, let alone buy a class from you.
So I understand the theory there, but how does someone practically do that?
That's the challenge.
Because it's one thing to say, hey, be vulnerable, tell a story, and it's an entirely different thing to execute that on an app designed for endless rapid-fire scrolling.
Right, attention spans are so short.
Exactly. But the guide goes into the actual architecture of this, explaining that these Instagram stories shouldn't just be random, chaotic snippets of your day. They need to function as micro-narratives, or what the author calls mini-films.
They absolutely need structure, a classic 3-act structure, but, miniaturized into 15-second increments.
Okay, break that down for me. What's Act 1?
Act 1 is the introduction of the context or the problem. Think of the creator saying, I've been really struggling with my spinal articulation in this specific roll-up move this morning.
Okay, setting the stage, setting the struggle.
Right. Then Act 2 is the development or the pedagogy. This is where they deliver the technical correction or share the specific aha moment they had to fix that problem.
Okay, let me jump in and push back on this a little bit because I'm thinking about the platform itself.
Sure.
Instagram stories are inherently ephemeral. They literally vanish into the digital ether after 24 hours. Doesn't that make the learning process way too fragmented?
That seems like it would, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm trying to learn a complex physical discipline, how on earth do you build a lasting, retentive community on content that literally deletes itself by design?
The paradox of the ephemeral format is actually one of the most fascinating parts of this research.
Okay.
Individually, yes, a 15-second story is brief and fleeting. But the magic lies in the accumulation and the regularity of these short bursts.
Accumulation.
Yeah. The guide cites a 2020 study by Latari et al., which found that structuring information narratively, even in these tiny bursts, massively improves cognitive retention.
Wait, really?
Right.
So just because it's framed as a story rather than a bulleted list, our brains actually hold on to it better. Why is that?
It comes down to how our neurology processes information. When you present a physical correction as a story, complete with a struggle in Act 1 and a resolution in Act 2.
A burnt onions and then the salvage dinner.
Exactly. You create a narrative gap. The listener's brain leans in, wanting to know how the struggle resolves.
Oh, I see.
And when you deliver the fix, the brain releases dopamine at that aha moment. That chemical release physically hardwires the memory in a way a dry, bulleted list of biomechanical facts just never could.
Okay, that makes perfect sense for the individual video, but how does that overcome the fact that the video is gone the next day?
Because when a creator posts these structured micro-narratives every single day, it establishes what psychologists call temporal habituation.
Temporal habituation.
Yes. It's no longer about whether you remember a single isolated video from last Tuesday. It's about that creator becoming a daily rhythm in your life.
Oh, wow. So basically, you're becoming a seamless part of their morning routine. You're training their brain to expect your face and your story right alongside their first cup of coffee.
You are. Their stories become a continuous, cohesive learning journey. The fragmented messages compound over time to build a solid, enduring relationship.
You aren't just giving them a fact.
No, you are giving them a daily ritual.
Okay, so we've set up the struggle in Act 1, and we've delivered the dopamine-releasing fix in Act 2. But we're talking about building community, not just a one-way daily lecture. How do they actually pull the audience into that 15-second window before the time runs out?
That is where the magic of Act 3 comes in.
Act 3.
Act 3 is the interactive conclusion. This is the use of a poll, a question box, or, an emoji slider to immediately pull the audience out of their passive scrolling and into the experience.
Getting them to actually touch the screen.
Right. The guide refers to this using studies by Aeschylus and Thompson on narrative co-creation.
Narrative co-creation, meaning the audience is literally helping to write the story.
They are. When you put a poll on a story asking, what is your biggest challenge in Pilates this week?
Mm-hmm.
You aren't just gathering marketing data.
Right.
You are transforming a passive viewer into an active co-author.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure book for fitness.
Yeah.
The creator takes the poll answers from Tuesday and uses them to write the script for Wednesday's content. The audience dictates where the journey goes next.
And the psychology behind why that works so well is rooted in self-determination theory.
Okay, what is that?
This was established by Deci and Ryan in 1985, and it posits that human beings have three core psychological needs:
Okay.
autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Narrative co-creation fulfills all three.
Break that down for me. How does tapping a little A or B poll on my phone fulfill my deep psychological needs?
Let's look at autonomy first. Autonomy is the need to feel like you have a voice and control over your environment.
Okay.
By asking for the audience's input and actually adapting the content based on their answers, the creator gives them that voice. They feel like they have a say in the direction of the channel.
Which makes them feel invested.
Exactly. Then there was competence. Imagine an instructor looking at the poll results and saying, hey, 70% of you voted that you struggle with the teaser move. You are not alone. It is incredibly difficult. And here is the biomechanical reason why.
Oh, wow. So suddenly, my failure isn't a personal flaw. It's a shared hurdle.
Exactly.
That immediately validates the struggle and makes me feel seen.
It validates them, which builds their feeling of competence. They realize they aren't failing, they're just learning.
And the third one was relatedness.
Yes, relatedness, the need to feel connected to others. The guide actually mentions a qualitative case study where subscribers literally compare a creator's daily stories to a petit feuilleton quotidien.
Meaning a daily soap opera.
Yes, a daily soap opera. Hearing a real voice, seeing relatable anecdotes, and knowing that hundreds of other people are answering the same polls makes them feel like they are part of a collective shared path.
That's powerful.
Fulfilling those deep-seated needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness is what actually cements long-term loyalty and trust.
You know, I am listening to this 3-act structure and the dopamine releases and the fulfillment of psychological needs, and honestly,
Yeah,
playing devil's advocate here,
go for it.
it sounds absolutely exhausting.
It does.
And beyond the burnout, there is a real tension here. Because if I am a creator and I am strategically scheduling my vulnerability into a content calendar,
Oh, right.
like if I literally write down on a spreadsheet Tuesday 9 a.m., show myself struggling with a stretch to build empathy and hit my engagement metrics, isn't that inherently fake?
That's the big question.
At what point does authentic storytelling cross the line and just become a calculated manipulation?
You are hitting on the darkest side of this equation, and Caroline's guide tackles it head-on. There is a massive tension between the desire for true authenticity and the relentless demands of a digital marketing strategy.
Yeah, you can't fake it forever.
No, you can't. A 2012 study by Pilates, which is highlighted in the text, warns about this specifically. Overly manufactured or fake vulnerability is almost always detected by the audience.
It's the uncanny valley of emotions.
Exactly.
We all have that internal radar. We know when someone is faking a cry on camera for views, or when a struggle feels rehearsed, it gives us the ick immediately.
And when an audience senses that a narrative is artificial or manipulative, the reaction isn't just disinterest. It is active rejection.
The trust shatters.
It shatters. And in a micro community centered on body awareness and sincerity, like Pilates, that loss of trust is fatal.
So how do you avoid that?
Well, to navigate this tension, the guide brings in a brilliant sociological framework. It's Irving Goffman's 1959 theory of impression management.
Impression management? That sounds a little like PR spin.
It can sound like that, but Goffman argued that all human interaction is a form of theatrical performance.
Really? All of it?
Pretty much. We all curate how we present ourselves to the world, even offline. Think about it. The way you act in a professional meeting is very different from how you act with your best friends at a bar.
Oh, absolutely.
But both versions of you are authentic.
That's true.
True authenticity online isn't about unfiltered chaos or pointing a live camera at your face 24/7 and showing every single flaw. It's about what the guide calls controlled exposure.
Controlled exposure. Okay, let's tie that back to the burnt onions from earlier.
Let's do it.
It means I am sharing a real, genuine failure, like burning the dinner, but I am actively choosing that specific failure to share because I know it will resonate rather than just airing all my dirty laundry indiscriminately.
That is the perfect way to look at it. It requires a flexible narrative posture. The creator has to be genuinely experiencing the things they share, but highly strategic in how they frame them.
It's a tightrope walk.
It really is. They have to constantly listen to the room. That means looking at the hard analytics like view counts and click-through rates, but balancing them with the qualitative feedback from comments and those Act 3 polls, and then adapting in real time.
So you can't just set it and forget it.
Not at all. If they stick to a rigid, overly scripted spreadsheet, it feels robotic and manipulative. But if they share too much without any structure or pedagogy, it lacks value and feels like oversharing.
Finding that sweet spot sounds incredibly demanding.
It is a full-time job.
Not to mention, you are doing all of this exhausting emotional labor for an algorithm that might just decide to change its mind on a Tuesday.
Don't get me started on the algorithm.
Right. The guide mentions the unpredictability of Instagram algorithms. You could craft the most beautiful, authentic, co-created, dopamine-releasing story, and the algorithm might bury it so nobody even sees it.
It happens all the time.
Plus, the audience themselves is suffering from digital fatigue. We are constantly being asked to vote, to swipe, to comment, to engage. It's exhausting on both sides of the screen.
The cognitive and temporal load on creators is immense. They are essentially forced to be full-time instructors, part-time psychologists, and digital media managers simultaneously.
That's a recipe for burnout.
Which is why the ultimate recommendation from the research is a hybrid, multimodal strategy.
Meaning you can't just rely on the 24-hour stories.
Right. Relying solely on the exhausting treadmill of daily, ephemeral stories is a one-way ticket to burnout. Creators need to mix those high-touch, vulnerable 24-hour stories with permanent, searchable content.
Like standard grid posts or reels.
Yeah. Exactly. Or long-form videos. The permanent content acts as the foundation. That is your savoir-faire, your technical expertise that proves you know what you are talking about.
Okay, I see.
Meanwhile, the ephemeral stories provide the daily heartbeat, the savoir-être, that builds the emotional connection and the community.
Okay, we have covered some serious ground today.
We really have.
To wrap this all up, what we are really talking about is a total rewrite of the rules of engagement for anyone trying to build a brand or a community.
Absolutely.
Moving from cold, technical, unidirectional instruction to warm, horizontal, interactive storytelling changes everything.
It's a paradigm shift.
By utilizing those 3-act micro-narratives, understanding the neuroscience of how stories aid retention, embracing a curated but genuine vulnerability through controlled exposure, and literally co-creating the journey with the audience. I mean, creators can forge communities built on an incredible foundation of trust.
It represents a fundamental shift from simply transmitting information to cultivating an ongoing living relationship.
Yeah.
The story isn't just a container for the facts anymore. The story is the connection.
So tomorrow morning, when you are listening and scrolling through your feed and you tap through an Instagram poll, or you watch a creator talk about their struggles while they sip their morning coffee, you are going to see the matrix.
You won't be able to unsee it.
You will see that invisible framework of persuasive narrative. You'll recognize the temporal habituation. You'll see the carefully managed impression. And most importantly, you'll know exactly why you feel so connected to them.
It's a powerful realization for any consumer of digital media. But it also leaves us with one final, lingering question to ponder.
Oh.
Yeah. We spent this time exploring how deeply humans can connect over these ephemeral 24-hour glimpses into each other's lives and the psychological theories that make that bond so strong.
Right.
But if a platform's algorithm changes tomorrow to hide those stories, what happens to that community?
Oh, wow. Huh.
Does true lasting connection really belong on a platform you don't own?
That is a heavy one. If the algorithm vanishes, does the community vanish with it? That is such a necessary question to ask, especially for anyone pouring their heart into these platforms.
Something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive and exploring these hidden frameworks with us. Keep questioning your feed, keep seeking the story behind the story, and we will catch you next time.